Commence primary ignition.
Hey there, friends, fans, and collectors. It's Wednesday, so we're talking Andor. Let's get going. This episode opens with Kino and Cassian transporting Urik's body back through a work facility and then them going back to their quarters. Kino decides to tell everyone what happened to Urik and the fact that there is no escape. Once your prison sentence is over, you're moved to a different prison and you stay incarcerated until you die. Cassian tells him that their plan relies on them attacking when they bring a new man in. It's the one time they bring the lift down to the ground. And he also has a great quote that power doesn't panic. That killing 100 men on the second floor was clearly a panic move, and they don't panic if they really are in power. This episode was fabulous for so many reasons, but we get a lot of underlying themes and even quotes that can be used by these characters and by rebellion members throughout the rest of the Galactic Civil War. Cassian has another great one. He says, "I'd rather die trying to take them down than die giving them what they want." And man, that could really be a motto that we know he lives and unfortunately dies by. What a dude. One mantra they have throughout their escape is, there is then, there is now, and there's only one way out, and that is to fight. Next up, we get the ISB. As we learned last episode, Krieger's pilot was captured and leaked all the information about Spellhouse and the attack. We learn on the scan that the pilot was frozen on hyperspace re-entry. And man, that's the first time we've seen or actually heard about hyperspace catastrophes like that. Hyperspace is terrifying, and when you zip in a hyperspace, apparently there's a module on a ship that keeps you from freezing to death, and sometimes it can malfunction. We're back on Ferrix for just a moment where we learn that, someone's hiding their medication and not taking it. It's most definitely Marva, but we also get a little view of Cinta, who's still there on the planet, observing and making sure that Cassian doesn't come back. Back on Coruscant again, we get an interaction between Mon Mothma, Davos Scullin, and Tay. Mon Mothma was previously apprehensive about inviting Davos Scullin into her home, but also doing business with him, and we learn in this interaction why. He is capable of moving money silently under the Imperial notice by bundling it and moving it with other finances. Davos Scullin is not only willing to do this for her, but he's willing to do it for free, charge-wise. We learn that he's a Chandrillan also, and as is Chandrillan custom, they marry off their children when they're very young. So in return, he's looking at a betrothal of his child to Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma may be faced with the decision of selling off her daughter in marriage, essentially, as due to Chandrillan custom, and funding the rebellion. Finally, back on Nekima 5, we see the prisoners begin their breakout. Previously, Cassian has been loosening a panel and kind of breaking through to one of the pipes that's in the bathroom on their work floor. Again, we see some really important thematic elements for the rebellion itself, but also for Cassian personally. Now, the quote of "don't die until you put up a fight" is really strong for just any kind of rebellion, but especially for this one that's overcoming so much Imperial oppression. And to climb, to rise, but specifically to climb. But this theme of climb, not only were Nemec's last words and what he told them they had to do to escape from Eldani, but as we can remember, it's also K2's last words to Andor as he climbs the spire in Rogue One to send the plans out. It's really interesting that this character has this specific word that a lot of people are telling him to do, and that perfectly encapsulates his fight against the Empire throughout his life. All of these men are decided on fighting and getting out, or fighting or getting out. They vastly outnumber the guards, and they put their plan into action when Cassian finally breaks what ends up being a water main in the bathroom. Now this starts to flood the bathroom and starts to pour water out. This water short circuits the floor, and as this is happening, the prisoners also stage a coup. Now this coup involves them throwing pieces of their metal at the guard up top as he is shooting and gunning them down, and eventually one of them will have the strength to climb up and take the guard down. this person ends up being Cassian, and all of the prisoners escape throughout the top by climbing up and escape to freedom, freeing other floors as they go on. This prison break was really beautiful to see. We get a really deeper tour of the prison, and it's neat that we do see that none of these guards have the E11 Imperial rifles. They all have DH-17s. And so that's what the guards had. They have that, and they have the shock sticks, and that's exactly what these prisoners use to turn against them, to rise up and to free themselves. We get a really amazing speech from Kino, played by Andy Serkis, the floor foreman, who, having fought with Cassian all the way to the central command floor, they take out the announcer and they give a really, really uplifting speech to rise up and free everyone else from the prison. It's really funny. The command room they fight to, actually, this is the robotic voice that we've been hearing over the prison that I assumed was an automated voice or a droid. It ends up being this little sniveling little human who, I guess, scrambles his voice to make it sound like a droid. So it was really cool to see that scene and to actually see the face of that voice, that it was an actual person. But Kino does a really fabulous job. Now, I know we've seen Andy Serkis in countless things for so much in over the last decades, but this might have been one of his best roles I've seen ever. He does a powerfully commanding job of acting, and just every single one of the speeches we've seen him give, this was probably his best episode. And we see him fight all these prisoners fight through the prison, all the way to daylight, diving off into the water. I thought they were like suicidal at first, but we see them diving to their own freedom and then swimming to whatever shore there is. I guess they're lucky it's not an entirely ocean planet, but it really hit home when Andy Kino gets to the top. He tells Andor he can't swim. And there's this moment where the whole crowd is rushing into the water. It's not spoken. Andor, do you think he might find a way to help him? I don't know how he could. Kino is either left there to figure out what everyone else is going to do, or left there to be killed by the Imperials when they come down eventually. This really did leave you with some serious feelings after watching this breakout. Back on Coruscant, we end this episode with the most important bit of information, the most important bit of setup that we've seen for a while. We learn from the ISB conference room that they are in full knowledge of Kreegyr's strike at the power station, and they're going to be wiped out or decimated if they're not told to halt the attack. And we see one of these, we hear that Luthen needs to meet with someone, one of his spies needs to meet in a face-to-face, and we see this ISB officer, the red-haired little one that we've seen in the conference room for a long time. We see the ISB officer, the red-haired ISB officer that we've seen in the conference room throughout the series, and we've been given shots of his reactions, and now we finally know why. It's that he is a mole for the rebellion. He is breaking, and he meets in a face-to-face with Luthen, and there is just some of the best. This is some of the best written, some of the most compelling dialogue and really monologues of any Star Wars show, definitely I've seen to date, but really definitely this whole entire series so far. This episode had everything in it, and he tells Luthen really that he's out. He really needs to be out. He's scared. He's freaking out. He's done so much, and Luthen not only says he can't be out, and this is part of his sacrifice for the rebellion, but he explains kind of what his sacrifice is. It hits you so well. And there were some great quotes like, there's no sunshine where I am, and I share my dreams only with ghosts and crap like that. It was really just so well written and intense. Luthen tells him he's trapped, and we learn that he's been an ISB mole for the rebellion for 6 years. He spills to Luthen about the pilot. We learn there's been an exchange of information for years, and he also tells them that if Kreegyr doesn't call up the Spellhouse assault, he's going to be killed and they're all going to be wiped out. Luthen's reaction to this is pretty cold and pretty telling, because if they do nothing, if they tell them they're going to know there's a mole, if they do nothing, these men are going to be sacrificed. And Luthen pretty coldly and pretty sternly and pretty immediately decides that, well, then Krieger will have to be sacrificed. And he does this not only to protect himself and to protect the rebellion, but also to protect this mole who's been undercover for all these years. And we learn a lot about these characters, and we learn a lot about where their values are, but also what they're willing to do to make sure those values are upheld. And it's pretty freaky to hear and to see. And again, that sparks more into the conversation of, what are you willing to sacrifice, Luthen? And he really does explain it in a beautifully haunting way. Luthen's values are that of Vel and everyone else that we've been hearing and seeing, and that is that the rebellion comes first. That being that the sacrifices they make are incomparable to the outcome and incomparable to the depths of darkness that could happen if they don't act. Luthen says, I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy against them. And that is really the mercenary cry, the freedom fighters' cry. It's, I have to use these tools of death and evil to fight evil itself. But some of these quotes he had in there, and the way they were acted, this really not only was the best written Star Wars, this was some of the best acted Star Wars I've ever seen. Now, Stellan Skarsgård just killing it as Luthen. And some of these quotes were delivered so perfectly. Like, I burn my life to make a sunrise I'll never see. Like, man. It was entirely intense, but really the best Star Wars we've seen yet. This episode ends with Melshi and Andor making it ashore on some beach, we don't know what beach, and escaping off into the triple moonlight. It was actually a really great shot of them escaping, and we see 3 different moons in the distance. Very sci-fi, but also very beautiful, which really should be the caption for this show entirely. But great episode. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I really was waiting for this escape. It did not go down the way I thought it would. It really did give some great character development and set up some thematic elements that will stay strong throughout the rebellion's fight against the Empire. Let me know what you think in the comments below about the escape, this episode, how this season's progressing. Thanks for watching another episode of Binary Sunset Review. As always, I've been Mike. Your likes and your views are greatly appreciated. I have a bunch of things I'm in line ready to review, but I have a new collection room, and I was thinking I should definitely do a new tour of that also. I did finally get to see Tales of the Jedi. It took me a little bit more time to get through it. There's just been a lot going on, but I do want to talk about it. I do want to hear what you guys are thinking about it. It is retelling some stories in some different kind of ways, so it's important to go through to note some changes and to see all the added extra stuff and the backstories that we're learning more about. Enjoy this fall weather. Have a great day out there. Stay safe, stay sane, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.
I'm just a simple man trying to make my